Hello, it's Chris Wade here from the Time for Impact podcast. Listen to this podcast, I hope, because you're interested in all things volunteering and innovation. One of the things that's happened quite a lot in recent years, certainly in the charity sector, is that the HR profession and the volunteering professions have joined functions, and volunteering is often managed within a larger people function. Recognising that this is something new to many HR professionals, Rob Jackson, Helen, Timbrell and myself, Chris Wade, have put together what we hope will be an exciting, informative and really supportive opportunity for HR professionals and HR leaders wanting to learn more about volunteering and what they need to do in their new combined HR and volunteering people functions to make sure that both their staff and their volunteers thrive and are successful in their organisations, and that the volunteering and their HR teams equally are set up as best they can to really benefit from working alongside each other. There'll be input from ourselves, of course, but we'll have special guests on the day as well from across the charity sector, from people who have been there, tackled this issue and come out with some real valuable learning. I hope if you are an HR professional involved in volunteering, I hope this will be of interest to you. Or if you're a volunteering professional, you know HR colleagues who may be interested, please do pass on the details. So realising potential, collaboration and integration in HR and volunteering will take place in Swindon at the National Trust HQ on Friday, the 15th of November 2024. To express an interest and book tickets, please contact Helen at helentimbrell.com. That's Helen at Helen, TIMBRELL.com. Hope to see you on the day. Thank you. Here's the podcast. So welcome to another episode of the Time for Impact podcast with myself, Chris Wade, and my co-host.
Hi everyone, I am Matt Cobble.
Today we're very lucky to be joined by Maddy Mills from the Family Volunteering Club. Hi Maddy.
Hi Chris, hi Matt.
Welcome to the podcast. As always, we'll start with a nice easy question, really just for perhaps you to tell us and tell our listeners a bit about the Family Volunteering Club and how it came about, how you got involved, what the genesis to the idea was.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you ever so much for having me. This is very exciting and a pleasure to be invited to be part of it. So Family Volunteering Club is a project I started a couple of years ago in 2019. Like lots of people, I used to do voluntary work and regularly when I was moved to London, and I was working with a couple of the same charities for sort of 6 to 8 years. And then I had a baby and I stopped whilst I initially had him. And then when I was ready to get back into it, I wanted to go back to those organisations, but I wanted to take my baby along, basically, and I couldn't for various reasons. It wasn't the most safe environment, and the time commitment didn't quite work with when I was available. And I sort of just really missed that, being part of that community and being able to make that direct change and positive impact and be part of that work that I was doing beforehand. So I felt a bit sort of cut out from everything really, and from that whole sort of part of my world. And so I decided that I thought there must be something that we can do here about this. And I spoke to some other people and other parents, and they would say, oh yeah, I used to do voluntary work and then I couldn't because the weekends are now just full of swimming lessons and football lessons and visits to this and that. And or we've got no time anymore. And so I thought, well, why don't we try and make some volunteering sessions where the children are welcome? And actually more than that, it's not just about the children being welcome, but they're actually an intrinsic part of it. So that's kind of how it came about. So in 2019, I had this idea. And I contacted a handful of organisations that I had existing relationships with. So people like the London Transport Museum, Draper Hall, which is a community centre on Elephant and Castle Roundabout, Coin Street Neighbourhood Centre, which is in Waterloo, and Ronald McDonald House, a couple of others as well, and said to them, hey, I've had this idea. Would you be up for me bringing some families to do some child-friendly volunteering? I've no idea how it's going to go, but would you be up for it? And they all thought it was great. So we did just that. And so in autumn 2019, we piloted those sessions, and we were just inundated with families. They came along, they were just like, this is amazing. Can we do more? When are you doing more? And we just sort of from that point knew that this could be something really special, really. Yeah.
And it's so surprising that there's so little family volunteering that you hear of across the sector. It seems such an obvious thing to do, yet it seems quite scarce in reality across the sector. I wonder if you have any thoughts about what the perceived barriers are to that.
Do you know what? I was talking about that with somebody the other day, because I used to work for somebody years ago, and I remember them saying to me, if you have a good idea, if nobody else is doing it, there's probably a reason. And this sort of mentality of, if you want to start an Italian restaurant, go to where there's already a couple of Italian restaurants, because obviously there's this sort of principle that actually, new ideas, if literally nobody else is doing them, then there's maybe a reason. And so I sort of, at first, I did lots of research, and I thought, surely somebody must be doing this. And there was a couple of things, the National Trust were doing a family day every year, which was amazing, and that seemed to be really popular. There was pockets of organisations doing one-off things, but what I wanted to create was a sense that people would spend regularly, this would become part and parcel of family life. They would spend their leisure time regularly together, volunteering in their community as a family unit, whatever that family unit looks like. I mean, we've had kids come along with grandparents, with neighbours before. It doesn't, it's a very broad spectrum of that interpretation of family. But there really wasn't anybody doing anything quite like that. So it was a bit daunting, because I thought, well, maybe there is a reason, and I'm going to find out. But actually, we've managed to kind of find our way through any hurdles or barriers, and create something that is quite unique and special.
I think, like a lot of people, I had a life before I joined the sector. It may have been 25 years ago, but I did other things. And one of the sectors I worked in was the restaurant industry.
Oh, yeah.
And I was, remember it was a fairly basic adage of the sort of family-friendly restaurants is that if you get the kids in, and think of the Ronald McDonald toys and the Happy Meals, if you attract the kids in, you bring the parents. So you'd think from a charity perspective, even from a very selfish perspective, you would think that charities, or more charities, would be thinking, well, if we can get the kids along, we get the adults involved in our volunteering. But I'd very rarely hear that kind of thinking across our sector. So I'm glad you're leading the way, if nothing else.
Thank you.
But do you have conversations with other charities around how they could get more involved in that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's lots of people that want to do it. So my background is not in volunteering, like my professional background. It's in the kind of arts and culture sector. And so like I mentioned, I used to do voluntary work kind of in my spare time, but I'm not a voluntary sector expert at all. So I think one of the things that, well, hopefully I'm a bit more now, but one of the things that's interesting about Family Volunteering Club is obviously volunteering is in its name, but we're not like a traditional volunteering program, because we're sort of halfway between it being a sort of civic participation volunteering project, and something fun and free to do with your kids, And so we're in that sweet spot where we do get people coming along who know that they want to be more part of their community and they want their kids to be, but we also get people that just want something fun and free to do with their kids on a Saturday morning. And the fact that they're helping the community is sort of secondary. And I'm really, that's a really important thing to us, actually, because it means we're getting this broader range of families involved.
But that, that should be the way that most charities think about. I'm sure Matt would say the same thing. How most charities should be thinking about involving people in their organisations. It's not purely what can a volunteer do for us as an organisation. It's more about us selling a pastime very often to those individuals. A byproduct of which, or a very important byproduct, is some community service or some help. So I think
Yeah,
there
absolutely.
alone is a learning for the sector.
Yeah, and I think, I've worked in, like I say, in the arts and culture and the VCSE sector, and it's a really incredibly rich and vibrant sector. It's, quite under-resourced in lots of ways. And I think, very simply, if you were to speak to certain organisations about family volunteering, 9 times out of 10, they would love to do it. But the first barrier would be, well, we don't have the resource, we don't have the capacity to do it. So actually what Family Volunteering Club is trying to do for the sector is make it easy, because we've made the mistakes, we know how it needs to happen, we've got the procedures, and we've got the formula, if you like, to how family volunteering can work in a community. And so hopefully we are capacity building, helping those organisations by taking some of that work away from them, so they can just deliver the exciting outputs, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
It sounds to me, and regular listeners will know, I think I basically talk about this in every single episode, but like it's screaming to me about this kind of dual benefit idea of volunteering as well, right? That volunteering is good for the people who, who receive the volunteering, but it's also good for the volunteer themselves as well, and that becomes even more exciting for me when you sort of scale that across a family unit. I guess my mind quite quickly goes to the opportunities for us as volunteering professionals to sort of market that, and maybe some of the challenges we have, which is, often talking about what we need from people and what the sort of beneficiaries of our organizations need from people, rather than the sort of value proposition of volunteering can be for a volunteer themselves, and particularly, as a family unit, like what can people get from this that is going to be really vital. And actually that might just be a fun day out, and that's great. But the big thing is that everybody wins ultimately at the end. I suppose a question from me, which I'm really interested in, because I think, as well as dual benefit, the other thing I can get quite excited about is the kind of the experience for volunteers. Like what makes a good family volunteering experience in your view?
Yeah, sure. So our sessions follow a kind of tried and tested formula. They're 90 minutes long. First of all, we do a lot of planning with the host organisation, with the charity, to make sure that the activities are going to be fun, they're child friendly, they're safe, and there's a variety of things to do as well, because kids can get bored. And then we make sure that all the equipment and the tools is the right size. So we get mini high vis jackets, mini gardening gloves, mini everything, so we know that the kids are going to be well catered for. There's going to be no sort of hiccups on the day. And also just making sure, like, I think when you're going to a new place as a parent, you worry about things like, is there going to be a baby changing facilities? Is there going to be hand washing? Is there going to be somewhere, is my kid going to get hungry and get hangry and it's going to be a nightmare? So we look after all those sorts of things as well. And so our 90-minute sessions, we start by bringing the group together, and we don't do drop-in sessions, because we're sort of trying to build communities here. We don't want people just to be sort of passively coming for 20 minutes and then leaving. So we do, obviously it's fine if people are late, but we do encourage people to come for the full 90 minutes. So we start with a kind of, depending on the age group, we'll do like a song or a game or something, just to kind of bring the kids together and get them energized. And then we'll give them a sort of age appropriate introduction to the host charity. So that might be, if we're working with a homeless shelter, for example, that might be like, right, well, let's talk to these 5-year-olds about what homelessness is, what having a home is, what when people don't have a home, how can we explain that to them in a very accessible and appropriate way. Or when we're talking to them, if we're doing an environmental gardening project, why are we talking about kind of biodiversity in cities? Why is that important? So just so kids kind of understand the context of what they are there to do. So it is a learning opportunity for them. And then we get stuck into the activities. And so the activities will be really varied. Like I say, it can be anything from, kind of, if we're doing a gardening project, it could be watering plants, planting bulbs. It could be making bug hotels, could making bird feeders for the garden. Lots of different things that would help those places to flourish. If we're at a food bank, it could be helping organise donations, sort them into kind of packages ready to be distributed. If we're working with a homeless charity, it could be sorting out clothes donations, separating the trousers from the t-shirts and putting them into different sizes. Those sorts of tasks. So we put a lot of thought into making sure that the tasks are appropriate. And I always say, the tasks we do are always helpful to the charity. They are, because children are they're the sort of tasks that probably adults could do in half the amount of time, and because children, they're not necessarily the most efficient kind of creatures, but that is absolutely not the point. The point is that it's about creating opportunities for them to engage that are accessible for them, and that means that they can have a nice time with their family doing it. So then once the activities are done, we then bring everybody back together for sort of a little tidy up time. And then we do a very popular snack time and story. So we'll often read a story that is linked to the theme of what we're doing today. And then they'll eat their bananas and their chocolate biscuits. And the parents, if we've got the facilities, the parents will have a cup of tea. And it's sort of just a nice time to sort of hear a bit more for them to chat amongst themselves and have a bit more, pick up a leaflet about the charity and learn what else is going on with that group. And then we part ways and we see them next time.
That's fabulous. And there was something on your website, talks in your vision, that attracted my attention. Like, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact words, but it was something along the lines that we want every child to grow up connected to their community. Is that right?
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit more about that?
I mean, I think, I'm not saying that this isn't happening through other initiatives and organizations, and, but what we'd like to be doing is contributing to that sense that, when kids grow up, they can sometimes feel that they're a little bit powerless in their community. They don't really understand actually that they can have a voice. They do have a say. Even at 2, 3, 4 years old, kids have got really they've got really interesting views. Really kind of can be slightly colourful and wild, but brilliant sort of commentary to make about things, and they ask questions. They're really curious, and then when you get into the kind of primary ages that we work with as well, again starting to think about forming ideas as well, there's a lot that we can be kind of listening to, and actually if we create that space to listen to those children, then we are obviously hopefully what they're saying is valid, and we can sort of act on and use that as something to contribute to those wider conversations. But for those individuals, that's people listening to them. That's people saying, you have a voice here. This is your place, your community. And I love the idea that these kids, I've been taking my son along, my older one, for years now. And we go past some of the venues or the charities that we used to. And he says, "Oh, I remember coming here. Do you remember we planted those and we did this?" And, it's just, excuse the pun, it's sort of planting the seeds, isn't it? And they do just remember those moments. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. And, I'd love to, one of the things that Family Volunteering Club wants to do more of is kind of embedded research and impact measurements, about working with children and how do we measure that kind of how they are developing that sense of civic pride, I suppose, in that area as well. So I think there's definitely more we can do there, but it's something that seems to be happening through the programme.
Given the opportunity, Matt and I will fill a whole podcast with conversations about citizenship, because we're both very big fans in the concept that volunteering is an act of citizenship, much much more so perhaps even than casting your vote every few years. It's actually playing an active position to your local society and making the changes that need making, and to embed that habit at such a young age, I think is it's it's certainly something we're really, really keen on. So it's great to hear.
There is a statistic a piece of research I was reading that says if you get a child involved with civic participation, so volunteering, for example, before the age of 10, they're more than twice as likely to it sort of forms that habit in later life.
Yeah.
So there's an awful lot of work happening to get teenagers involved with community and civic participation, and there's some fantastic initiatives. But I think what we're missing is that what happens before that, and a lot of it happens through schools, which is fantastic. But I think we also need to exist outside the education sector, sort of nurture those conversations and that work that's happening kind of at home and in that very day-to-day kind of way.
And you mentioned impact measures, and it's probably another frustration of mine, and part of the reason why I started an organisation called Time for Impact. I imagine that I think as a volunteering sector, I don't think we put enough effort into demonstrating the social value of the programs that we create. I know it's very hard. It's not an easy thing to do. But even within the charity sector, most other functions are pretty good at demonstrating their impact. But in volunteering, we seem to just assume that it's a good thing and assume that other people think it's a good thing. And I think a lot more work is needed in all of our strategies to demonstrate that we're not just a nice to have function within a charity. Actually, we're an essential builder of social capital. So I'd be interested to hear your views on how you would plan to do that or are doing that at your organisation.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think the word volunteer, I know we've got a charity that's got the word volunteering slap bang in the middle of it. But I think it's quite a tricky word because I think there's a lot of connotations of it being a sort of luxury, of it being sort of a bit not frivolous, but something that isn't critical. And it sort of needs a rebrand. I think there's something about we need to kind of find, the word citizenship, I think kind of is quite, I don't know, you may say actually that word's been around for ages, but I feel like in the last year or two that's sort of been used a lot more. And it is a kind of quite an exciting and powerful word. And I think volunteering is one part of citizenship. It's not a replacement, but I think there's something in the semantics of the word volunteering that we just need to. And maybe Chris, you're absolutely right. If we can find a sort of way of demonstrating that impact in that much more tangible way about volunteering, then hopefully we can start to change that perception.
Do you think this speaks to, I guess, a shift around the sort of formality of volunteering as well as the language, like not just like what we label it, but also what it kind of feels like and how easy it is to get involved? I'm just reflecting that like a lot of the kind of things you just described when I said, well, what does a good family volunteering experience look like? That doesn't necessarily ring true in terms of some of the volunteering experiences I've had over the years. Now, to some extent, they worked for me. I wonder if this thinking around language, this engagement of families, sort of tends us towards the more informal, the more sort of local, community based, rather than the more structured kind of institutionally based volunteering, and whether the challenge for all of us is to think, how can we create the space for these kind of different kinds of opportunities within organizations?
I think that's spot on, and I think there is still a massive need for that more traditional formal volunteering engagement where people apply and they have proper training and they have to sign up for a minimum of 6 months, and that absolutely needs to happen still. But we need to look at who's not able to engage through that way, and there are lots of different communities who can't engage with that sort of level of commitment, really, it comes down to. And one of them is families. And so it's about, I think everybody cares about what's happening in the world on some level. I think everybody's got something that they really wish they could contribute to. And I think we've got to find ways for people that go, actually, that issue, I really care about homelessness, but I don't know how, I don't have the time and I can't really engage. I'll put every Christmas, I'll donate 20 quid or what, it's that. But so who is that person? Why can't they engage? And how can we create opportunities for them to get more kind of hands-on? And so the family market, if you like, is the one that we're sort of working with to try and make it more accessible, so we can harness all, just, obviously it's primarily about the children, but also those adults as well. They're people that ordinarily wouldn't be able to help and engage. And if you get an adult coming along with their kid and they suddenly go, oh, actually, my company might be able to support this charity, or, oh, I might be able to donate some stuff to this, or actually there might be something I can, write to my local MP actually about the work they're doing. You're kind of creating access points for those people as well who would be kind of struggling otherwise to have the time to spend getting to know and sort of supporting those charities that are sort of local to them and are probably very important to them as well.
And I really like that as an approach, because I think sometimes it's easy for us to think, well, people in this category don't care, or they're too busy, or they've got too much going on in their lives to think about their community or think about changing the world in its biggest sense, right? And I think what I'm hearing from you, Maddy, is no, this group of people, they're really passionate about their community. They do want to change the world. They do want to make things better. They do want to share their voice. They do want to get their hands dirty and engage, but we're not always making it easy for them to do that. And actually, if we can create the right structure and the right framework to enable that, we can tap into that sort of latent motivation. This is on us to activate that and to create the opportunities to enable it.
Absolutely. I think there's also a lot of informal volunteering that just happens day to day. So, like as we saw during COVID, people just checking in on their neighbours, people like offering to do food shops. I think there's a lot of those things that we wouldn't necessarily package them up and say, oh, that's volunteering, but it is, it's kind of unpaid support for different causes, communities in your area. And I think that's a really important thing to recognise, that there is a lot of amazing kind of stuff happening under the radar, if you like, which should absolutely be supported and should continue. I think for Family Volunteering Club, we're about trying to, in a sort of geographic, we're not interested in just going to one organisation and telling them how to do volunteering, family volunteering. We want to go to a geographic area. We want and build a program, work with that community to build a program for that area that's kind of embedded in and that has that's connected with each other. So you might have one organisation who has a really strong family audience and the other one from one kind of estate and one that has it from another estate. And actually by having this kind of program, you're swapping communities, you're swapping audiences across each other. And I like the idea that, I mentioned at the beginning that the kids, often family life at the weekend can look like swimming back to back with football, when going to a play date, going to the playground, whatever those things are. And actually what I would love is Family Volunteering Club to be one of those things that people are doing on a regular basis. So people go, what are we doing this weekend? We haven't been to Family Volunteering Club for a few weeks. What have they got on? Oh, they're at the local community garden. Oh, we haven't done one of those sessions. Let's do that one. And then the next week they can kind of drop into another one. So it becomes very sort of embedded in. And we've got this kind of plan that I'm not letting it go. I really like the idea that we build this kind of an app or a passport or something for the kids, so they kind of get they get to kind of superpowers the more volunteering they do. So each time they go to a session, they get like a a stamp or something that builds them into a kind of a volunteering superhero. And then after a certain number, it's a bit like the parkrun model, after a certain number of miles run, if you like, so a certain number of sessions, they kind of get little rewards or freebies or things. Not that would be the motivation for them doing it, but I just think it's a nice way of kind of maintaining engagement and keeping them interested in trying out the different elements of the program. So we'll that is staying in the business plan. So it would be nice to create something, because we want it to be something that kids just really love doing and really look forward to doing.
I think it absolutely should stay in a business plan.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think there's sort of recognition, isn't there? Like part of that is sort of recognition, right? And that seems to be sort of part of the parkrun model, right? A little bit. But there's also the sort of gamification aspect of it, right? Which is like, it's the nudge, it's the move to the next thing, whatever. And I guess that's the world that we're living in now, right? Enabled by digital technology. There's some of the key components of things that keep us motivated or whatever. It's probably a slightly old-fashioned analogy now even, but you're walking X amount of steps in the day and then you get a badge to say you walked the amount of steps, right? It's the kind of volunteering version of that, I guess, which is great. I think we should be doing that.
And not just for the children, for the parents too.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it?
I was wondering, Maddy, about what you might say to someone who feels that sort of engaging families and particularly sort of younger children in volunteering is like risky business. Like, what's the how can we instill confidence in people that actually this is okay, like this is something we can do, this is something that's useful, and it's and it pays off ultimately?
Yeah, of course. I mean, working with children, you've got to do things incredibly thoroughly, and so when we work with organisations, we have really robust safeguarding policies that we follow, and insurance, and like I say, we design the program so carefully to think, what would a child do in this situation? Is there any risk? Some organisations, we have to adapt the activities because, for example, when we work with a homeless charity, for example, it wouldn't be appropriate to have direct interface with the service users, for example. So we find ways that we can contribute and help without it being that kind of direct connection. So we're just incredibly careful about that. I think it does take thought, and it's not something you can kind of flippantly do, but through proper risk assessments and safeguarding, you can absolutely make it happen. And it's one of those things that once you've done it once and you see how it can work, it is really exciting, and sort of unlocks the ideas for more, really, I suppose. And there are some venues that we work with where we actually, we did one with the Felix project, and we were in their warehouse, and initially we were like, oh gosh, kids in the warehouse, how is this going to work? And we sort of had to really work to figure out how we could do it safely. But we created an area for them. We made sure there was absolutely no risks in that area, that they were the only people in that area. We got high vis jackets for them. We did all these different measures, and it was absolutely brilliant. It was such a fantastic session. So I think, you've just got to put the work in. And I think that's where we, for the organisations we partner with, obviously we have a lot of experience of running them, so we kind of know how things can look and what sort of activities are the best activities. But we also do we have a small budget for the session to support the organisation's time to do the session, any materials, they can put it towards cleaning, any staff that need to come in on a Saturday early or whatever that thing is. So and that's a really important thing, because what we do not want to do is be an extra we don't want to be a drain on anybody's resource on an already very pressured sector. We need to keep sort of supporting that and being respectful of people's time and through that.
And I'm sure there will be some of our listeners, most of which are volunteer managers of some description, being encouraged by what you say in terms of these risks are manageable and rather than avoidable, which I think is our default position. Um, but I'm guessing volunteer managers are always concerned that their programs are going to be sustainable in the
Mm.
long term and that they've got the resources to deliver them. So could you say something about the kind of resourcing that's involved in putting an average event together, what your staffing situation is and how you go about organising
Yeah, of course.
your activities?
Yeah. So the model we're sort of developing is that we have a local coordinator who is somebody who lives locally in the area. They are a paid role and they are responsible for leading the community consultation to kind of build. So we go out to the first thing we do is go out to the community and we say, what would you like to be engaging with? What issues are concerning you? What would you like your children to be learning about? And so we do a sort of consultation period. And so then that local coordinator takes all that information, goes out and speaks to local partners and starts to find the right people for it. So we always start in an area with a pilot program, which is sort of between 6 and 8 events, to test it, to see what the appetite is. Every community is different, so we need to know how it could work in that area. And it's an opportunity to do it on a small level where we, if anything, kind of, if there isn't a good take up for certain types of events or whatever, we kind of know before we've kind of gone all in. So then we sort of evaluate that and then kind of sort of apply for future funding then to grow it. So it's a sort of 3-stage growth program, a plan for each area to get it to becoming a regular. So in terms of sort of the commitment and risk, we're not overcommitting before too early. But essentially the local coordinator will co-facilitate each session with the charity. So they will be there to support and do the kind of welcome and the games and the kind of help frame the session for the organisation. Some organisations we work with already have volunteering programmes, they already do children's programmes, and they have people that are very brilliant at facilitating. Some have never done that before and need a bit more hand holding, but that's not a problem. We work with people from different levels of experience. So then our coordinator will sort of help hold the event with them. And then we look after sort of the Central Family Volunteering Club charity. Sort of we look after all the policies and procedures. We sort of the marketing on our website. We've got an amazingly strong mailing list of families that want to kind of come to our work. So we sort of try and take away as much of the administrative and operational stuff as possible so that the local coordinator can just focus on the creation and the delivery. And then the host charity or whoever that partner is we're working with, it's a lot lighter touch for them.
I know, obviously, as an organisation, your aim is not to get other organisations doing family volunteering separate from what you're doing. Obviously, you work with local partnerships and you try to build a community, but nonetheless, there will be people listening who are saying, well, we ought to have a family volunteering program within our charity or within our organisation. Have you got a couple of tips that you would really want to share with those individuals so they can think about creating their own programs?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, I would always advocate for the Family Volunteering Club model is for there to be lots and lots of family volunteering clubs locally run across the UK. I think if people are interested in exploring it just as an organisation, the first thing to do is speak to the community. I think you can't build anything successful without speaking to the people that you want to be engaging. So go and talk to them. Everything from what's interesting about our organisation, what days would work for you, what facilities would you need, what would stop you coming. We also have a small access budget. So if there's people, for example, that say we'd love to come, but we're struggling with the bus fare at the moment, then we can help with that, things like that. So I would always say, my first thing would be always start with your community and they will help provide a lot of the answers. I would think give yourself some time. It's not... Sometimes we meet with partners and they go, great, let's do it this Saturday. And we're like, oh, no, we have to kind of get some things in place and that's amazing. I love that energy. I absolutely love it. But we have to have time to kind of make sure all the paperwork is right, the risk assessment's there, the safeguarding, everything. So give yourself a bit of time to make sure that it can happen. And I guess the third thing would be, depending what age group, what age kids you're engaging, make sure it's fun for them. Kids are so honest. I went to something with my baby the other day, and there was a little girl there, and she just turned to her mum and was like, "I'm bored." And kids are so honest. Like, make sure it's fun. Make sure there's, like I say, facilities. There's time for them to have snacks, all those kind of things that kids need. So yeah, speak to your community, give yourself some time, and make it fun.
I wanted to ask you about funding. Not how you get your funding, or you can tell us that if you like, but just your experience of getting external funders interested in the concept of family volunteering in particular, but volunteering specifically, because there's not always the best track record across the sector of trust funds and so on investing in volunteering as a core part of the organisation as opposed to a project added on. Maybe family volunteering might actually be, I suspect, might be different in that the family angle might be attracted to funders. Can you tell us a bit about your experience of attracting funding to the...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, we're still on a journey with that. We're sort of changing our operating model at the moment. We got charitable status last year, so we are, even though the project's been going for a few years, I had another job. I was running another charity until the end of 2022. So it was very much an evening and weekend hobby project. And now it is a proper thing, and we're employing people. And so we're really stepping up our game in our efforts at the moment. So we are on a journey with that. I think it is hard with volunteering because it does take, there's a sort of a bit of a myth that looking after volunteering programs is easy and kind of saves money. And actually it takes an awful lot of people power to recruit volunteers, to retain volunteers, to look after them properly. In a way, volunteering programs don't necessarily save an awful lot of money to an organisation all the time. I mean, that's caveated with, obviously there are times where it will absolutely, but you need volunteer managers, volunteer coordinators in place, which are completely essential roles to support those. Again, I'm sure there's people listening who are much more of an expert on me, but the thing that I tend to hear from funders is obviously demonstrating impact, and where the need is the biggest. People want to be, there's a lot of areas around the UK, for example, at the moment that are particular priority areas. And so, being able to kind of work with those in those areas, or these particular communities that they might want to see that you're engaging. So I think I'm probably not saying anything that nobody's listening is news to anybody, but that's sort of our experience really, is about impact. And I think the family thing for us is interesting, and the fact it is new. We are a charity. We are having positive impact, but we're also trying to build something which is a sort of social change project, I suppose. So there's kind of two narratives, if you like, to what we're doing. So when we go out to funders, we've got different ways of talking about our work, depending on what they're interested in. I think,
Maddy, I'm interested, a couple of times on the session today, you sort of said a version of, I guess, you don't have a background in volunteering, which I think is interesting. I suppose I believe your background's in the arts, right? What do you think? On the understanding that they're not always mutually exclusive, but what do you think that the volunteering world as it is can learn from the world of art and creativity?
The first thing that springs to mind is the sort of I'm not saying the volunteering sector doesn't think this way, but the human element of everything and the individuality of people. I think there's in the arts and culture sector, there's a lot of work that's working with artists who are often creating work about the kind of self, if you like. You realize how kind of every single human is so different and so nuanced. And so I suppose working with volunteers, like just sort of realizing that if you recruit a pool of 5 volunteers, they're all entirely different people. They're all going to have different needs and perspectives and voices, and they're all coming with different lived experiences. So I think just making sure that you don't fall into that one size fits all kind of mindset.
This is about new perspectives, and a lot of us have been involved in volunteering for years, and
Yeah.
it's really nice just to hear sometimes from people who have got other experiences. I mean, partly why I brought in the restaurant quote early on, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I think the more we, as a sector, look outside and learn from other industries, other people's experiences, I think there's always some tangential learning that we can take along and reflect upon and change our own practice as a result of that. So I think that's why Matt and I are always kind of intrigued to see other new ways of looking at it.
I'll finish this call and then think of a really good answer to that question. I don't know. I expect a lot of people come to volunteering because they want to connect with other people and they want to become part of a community. And that is like, the same as, when you choose to go to a live gig or go to the theatre, you want to kind of share in that live moment with lots of other people. And there's a lot of commonalities between those experiences as well.
Is that feels quite interesting though, because that brings me into the space more of like, I guess, curation of volunteering opportunities. And for me, like often I feel like volunteering and role design and opportunity design feels more like HR. It feels more like human resources, right? And maybe we need to think more creatively. Maybe our opportunity design needs to be more about curation. It needs to be more about experiences and connections, and less about jobs and tasks. I wonder if there's something in that, and how we can shift our mindset. And I wonder if you are shifting that mindset, how that maybe starts to make you think about, okay, I really want to connect with families. What do I need to, what do I need to present? How am I going to engage families? What am I going to, what kind of scene am I going to create that is going to make these people feel a real connection and with each other, with the place they're in, with our cause? Like maybe that's the answer there.
Yeah, I think that's really, really, really great. I think this idea of how you curate the experience of volunteering is a really nice place to come from, because you're absolutely right. Like it can just feel quite transactional sometimes because of and it often comes down to very necessary, but the kind of heavy paperwork can be quite heavy, and that is often very necessary. But I think there's a responsibility here for the funders of the programs and the funders of the sector in terms of who are often the ones that are requiring a lot of the paperwork that sort of takes up a lot of the volunteer managers' time to be done. So I think if you can we can look at that as well, and how funders can kind of better support organisations to sort of lighten their load so they can spend more time creating social events for their volunteering teams, or sort of social exchanges between them, or whatever's drawing those volunteers to come and engage with that charity, whatever their kind of need is to do more of that. I think that would be a nice place to start as well.
We talked a lot about what you're involved in at the moment. I guess I'm really interested in what's next for family volunteering in your world.
World domination. No, we are sort of growing slowly. We are, I would say, our kind of program. We're working in South London. We're working in Stevenage. We're working in Abergavenny. We are working to sort of secure those programs longer term. And then we're speaking to, I've got a spreadsheet of about 30 other places in across the UK, of places that have been in touch that want to start programs in their areas. So I get almost a weekly email from somebody saying, can we start it in my area? It's really to start looking at how we can kind of scale up that model. Obviously, a lot of it comes to funding. So I would say the two priorities for us at the moment is sort of organizationally sort of developing that model, but then also deepening our impact. So the places where we are working, making sure that we are continuing to engage new families and people that hadn't thought about volunteering before, making sure that we're having the biggest impact that we can possibly be having in those areas as well. So it's about reach and depth of impact.
And I suspect that on the back of this, you might get that spreadsheet might grow a little bit more with a few more areas reaching out to you.
I'm delighted to hear from anyone interested in it, because I think, it's something that's just so, the sessions are so joyful and so positive, and I just love the idea that some of those kids that are coming along might remember it, and we might be igniting a little spark of something inside them that goes, actually, why is the world like this? Why is this injustice here? How can I make a change? And they may kind of carry that with them, and maybe they'll become a sort of significant change maker of tomorrow. Or maybe they'll just have a wonderful time with their family, but maybe.
Or both.
And there's value in all of that, right? That's
there
the key.
is.
That's the
There absolutely is. Yeah.
So I'm so glad we had this conversation, Maddy. I started by saying, why aren't others doing this at the beginning of the podcast? I'm still asking myself that question. It feels like something the sector is way behind on and really needs to catch up on. And I'm delighted that you're leading that charge, and hopefully you'll go from success to success. If people want to get in touch with you and the organisation, how should they do that?
They're very welcome to. So they can there's a contact form on our website. So our website is familyvolunteeringclub.co.uk. My email is maddie@familyvolunteeringclub.co.uk. And so happy to hear from anybody interested in finding out more, or wants to support us, or wants to, have a chat.
And on the social media or...
Yes, we are. We're on Instagram and on Facebook as well. We're a bit more active on Instagram. There's a lot of pictures and videos of our work on that. So people can kind of follow us on there as well.
Brilliant. And no doubt by the sounds of it, there's an app to follow very soon.
Well, yeah, watch this space. Yeah, absolutely. Family Volunteering Club superhero app coming soon.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us, Maddy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lovely chat. Thank you.
So that was a really interesting talk on family volunteering, Chris. What are some of the reflections you have from today's call?
Well, first of all, I just want to comment on what a beautifully constructed product they've already got to get going there. It's clearly something they've worked on really hard. It's something they seem to have got down, working very, very seamlessly. But most of all, I'm intrigued, Matt, why I don't hear more people in the sector talking about family volunteering. I wouldn't say I never hear it, but I very rarely hear people talking about how do we get the whole family involved in volunteering in our organisations or in our communities. A bit over time, isn't it, Matt?
Yeah, I wonder if it's like a case of mindset, maybe. Like, certainly I think it's something I've been guilty of, is that, you think of volunteering, you think of like individual participation. But certainly every organisation I've ever been involved in, I can think of examples of amazing families who are involved in that activity, extremely dedicated, bringing a huge amount to that. And why would we not want more of that? And I guess bringing me on to the second point, which I think is really important here, is about this young people getting involved and really creating a habit of volunteering from a very early age, and the importance of, really connecting with your community, the place, the people, and having a voice as part of that as well. That really for me is that kind of active participation in its most kind of basic, most fundamental form, I think.
And it all ties into your comment, which I thought was very insightful, if I may say so, around curation rather than human resourcing. And too often, I think our mindset is on we need X number of people to do X, Y, and Z roles or to fulfill certain purposes. And we're seeing them as resources, not as customers, and not as active participants in our work. And I think that curating of the experience is absolutely central to that.
And I thought it was interesting that Maddy touched on, or at least I know Maddy was involved in London 2012, for example, and the volunteer engagement around that. And I wasn't involved in that, but I looked at it from the outside, and that looked like a curated volunteering experience to me. There was a lot, or it seemed to be a huge amount of thought put into what that was about and what it looked like and what it felt like and how you sort of piqued curiosity in that space. So I think that's interesting itself. And I wonder if maybe some of that carries through into this kind of into family volunteering as well. What do we need to think about to make or to pique people's interests around volunteering to make it interesting, engaging, to make it fun? And that's definitely probably more about curation, right? What are the things around the outside that we need to organize to make that a really great experience?
Hopefully a theme we'll be exploring a little bit more in future episodes, for sure. So if you have ideas for future episodes, please do get in touch. You can always email Matt and I on podcast@timeforimpact.co.uk to suggest guests, to suggest subjects, to suggest we talk to you. I don't mind. Get in touch. We'd love to hear from you, and to give us any feedback is also really good too. If you've enjoyed what you've listened to, hopefully you've made it to the end, so that's a good sign. So please do follow, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and come back for more episodes. And if you have an opportunity, do rate, hopefully highly, our podcast as well, because that all helps to get us higher in the feed on the various streams. Until the next time, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.